Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Radults podcast, the podcast that highlights the stories of people who said fuck that to the idea that growing up means giving up on your dreams, and instead turn those dreams into their reality. This week's guest is illustrator and art director Goldie Bartlett. Goldie works primarily in the indie video game scene in Melbourne, having contributed to various titles, including the Apple Design Award-winning mobile game Florence, which was curated as one of Time Magazine's top 10 games of 2018. Goldie is a Radult working in one of the raddest fields I can think of, and we are stoked to have her on the podcast.
For our listeners, who are you and what do you do?
I am Goldie Bartlett, and I'm an artist who works mostly in sort of the fringe indie video games sphere in Melbourne. I have a background in illustration. I have a degree in game design. I do a little bit of graphic design as well. Sort of a hodgepodge mix of creative things. But yeah, I work in the games field. Not quite the games industry, but
Around it.
Yeah, in the area.
Your neighbours.
In the areas of games.
She works on the periphery.
Yes.
Yes. Now, what would you say the indie video game scene is like in Melbourne, say in comparison to other regions of the world?
Really healthy. So in an Australian context, Melbourne's very spoilt. We have a couple of government bodies which sort of siphon money into our industry, which, you know, Adelaide and Sydney and Perth and other states, cities and states don't have. So the Melbourne industry for people who just want to try to like make games with their friends and sort of get their little studios kickstarted, or not kickstarted through Kickstarter.com, but kickstarted literally, the term. Yeah, it's a good place. So because of that, it's thrumming. And I think compared, like in an international context, Melbourne's just got that sort of Melbourne thing about it, where we are creative people, we're sort of leftovers. Sometimes I think Melburnians feel a bit like we're leftovers, so we make the best of it by just like punking out and having fun and going to gigs and being really collaborative and throwing parties and making games.
I like that you like state that we're leftovers, because I think that the other word that I use is outcasts. I mean, I think that we're looked upon negatively because we think that we're the best, because, I mean, I believe we are the best. But people think that we think that way, which they're true. But I think you've hit the nail on the head that it's like, you know what, we're the ones that got left out of everything else, and it just happens to be that these people that have been left out are talented in their own little fields, so that we get the best of all worlds. You know, we've got good coffee.
We have great coffee. That's thanks to the Italians, I think.
Yeah, and then we have the video game industry that we have here.
We're the live music capital of the planet.
Well, that's it. And I have been thinking about, you know, indie games and how they relate to live music and playing in bands and all of the jobs and roles that are in the music industry. And man, there's so many parallels. It's uncanny. Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of video games, Florence floored me.
Yep.
Like, really floored me. The game definitely made me feel everything it wanted people to feel and more. Like, I think that obviously people will take away whatever they take away from the game. There's obviously a distinct thing. How do you feel everyone made that happen without actually telling you to feel that way?
I think Florence has proven itself to have this effect, you know, worldwide. It's won a buttload of awards and sort of fame for the studio, which is really nice. How I think they made people feel that way, well, you know, I mean, in the same ways that a film that's designed to make somebody feel a certain way does what it, you know, like, there's all sorts of like tips and tricks. Like the score, for example, is really powerful in the game. being more specific to game design, I know that they spent a lot of time designing the interactions that the player makes with the phone, sort of mirror the way that you might interact with difficult situations or feelings that you could be going through in the story beats. So for those of you who haven't played it, Florence is a short mobile game about a young woman named Florence who kind of isn't very satisfied with her life, and she gives up things that she really likes to do as a child, and sort of just gets a job as an accountant, and then she falls in love with this guy, and you sort of move into their apartment together, and then play through a chapter where that relationship starts to kind of fall apart, and then there's an ending which I won't give away, but each beat of that story is sort of played out through a long series of vignettes, so micro scenes that you just sort of have to pass through. So it's a little bit like reading a comic that you're interacting with.
And that's what was two weird things that I found about it was, firstly, the interaction that you have with the game, the different activities that you do remind me very, very much of WarioWare and other Wii games where you do similar things. So to have the comparison of a game that was so uplifting like WarioWare and kid friendly to do similar type interactions, you can't take that out of your head at the same time, so it's just weird. The other one is I found that while I was listening to the game, while I was playing, I couldn't help but feel that the whole game was composed by Krish doing the music.
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if that was purposeful, but I just imagined that the whole time. For anyone that hasn't played it, Krish is one of the characters in the game, and it is a musician, and the whole time I just imagined that it was him playing.
Yeah, I think I was only contracted to work on Florence for a while, so there's a core team of I think 4 of them, so a producer, the creative director, and 2 programmers, and I was hired on as sort of a visual consultant for a while, so a story consultant and then a visual consultant, and then as an artist for a while. And one of the things that I said really early on was, hey, why is Krish playing a guitar? Let's have him play a cello. That's a much more beautiful instrument. It's sort of, its range is much closer to the human vocal range. Whoever's writing the music for the game will have a much happier time with a cello than with a guitar. And yeah, it really is a beautiful soundtrack that was composed by a guy called Kevin Penkin, who is a beast. And yeah, I think that that's a perfectly reasonable reading to have of the game. I don't think it is his music. It's not stated anywhere that is his music. I don't even think it was intended to be, his music. But I think that you have read that from it is nice. It's a nice thing.
I was just taking it whenever they were apart, doing their own day-to-day activities. It almost at least for me, served as a reminder that in a way, although Florence is the focal point in this game, there really is 2 parties involved in the events that happen. So it's kind of for me, served as a reminder that there's this background character that you're just not seeing at that time.
Yeah. So again, early on when I was sort of consulting on the story and we were talking about what should happen in Florence, and it went through a lot of shifts and changes, the original plan was to have them get back together at the end of Florence. And I said, this is me being really haughty, but I was like, you can't do that. This is a game called Florence. It's a game about Florence. And if Florence and Krish break up and then we resolve on Krish being vital to the ending of her story, you've kind of not really made it about Florence. Like, you've taken a lot away from Florence's character and independence by saying, well, she needs Krish to find whatever happiness she has coming. Yeah.
And you definitely, like it touches on that. Like, I mean, and obviously that's a focal point that shows that, you know, she doesn't hate Krish. Like, she finds, like, the photo, and it's not like she tears it up or burns it. Like, you put it back in the box of her possessions to move on. But, and then also she finds, like, the paint palette and, like, takes that back up. But then it also, like you said, it shows Florence moving past this relationship. Yeah, there was, like, the moments of sadness, you know, after the breakup, but then showing that obviously, like, life goes on.
Yeah,
it doesn't just end with losing a partner, and she finds happiness again. So I think you're 100% on the ball with going, like, he doesn't come back.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about
him anymore.
Yeah,
you know, it's about Florence.
But it doesn't take away that there is a happily ever after story in that. And
I think for a long time they planned to end it with, and I don't remember the ending. It's been a while since I've played it, but with the last screen being like a ringing phone, and you can it's from Krish, and we're assuming already now that we're sort of 15 years or 10 or 5 years past the ending. And this phone screen's ringing and it's from Krish, and you can choose to answer it or not answer it. And I think that was just like, it didn't matter, you know, it would still say the end, you know, either way. But even that was a bit too much for me. I thought, I was like, no, just no more Krish. He's done.
Speaking of Florence, before we diverse a bit, the game was recently curated as one of Time Magazine's top 10 games of 2018.
Correct.
Where were you when you heard that news, and how did that make you feel?
I was I would have been in Melbourne, maybe at my office. I don't remember where I was when I heard it. You know what, with Florence, like, for a while there, every week it was like, Florence has won an Apple Design Award, Florence has won this, Florence has been nominated for that. And yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good for the Melbourne industry, and it's a great game, and there's some lovely people on that team. But there's a little bit of me that always goes, oh, because I mean, you know, this is opening my heart a little bit more than I should. But I worked on that game with my ex.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Your Krish.
Yeah, with my Krish, and like, you know, we're okay friends and everything, but to be in a room no bigger than this room for a period of time, trying to nut out how breaking up feels and how to articulate it through games was so hard, was really, 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 really hard. And so there's a little bit of me that, like, when I hear all of this, like, Florence stuff, I'm like, oh, yep, go Florence. Good Florence, but also I want to move on and do the next thing, you know, in my life.
Moving away from this, how much does your local area that you live in influence your art?
Every waking minute is influenced by my town. I'm hugely influenced by Melbourne. So I'm like, my family's been in Melbourne since, you know, I guess white people have been in Melbourne. And we grew up in Port Melbourne, and that's where my great-great-great-great-grandpa and grandma were, in I think the same house. And so I've got it in my blood to really have a vested interest in Melbourne. And luckily, I've found a lot of ways to interpret my sort of thoughts and feelings around the city into my drawings and into my games. My first uni project was called Movement Study 1. It was set in Brunswick on Albion Street, as well as on Smith Street at a bar. And it's just about, like, it's sort of, I guess it's like kind of autobiographical light. So there's two characters, and both of those characters represent a part of myself or, some friendships that I've had, and sort of like an amalgamation of a bunch of things. But yeah, we set it in Brunswick, and there's this one particular part of the game where you're just walking from your house to your friend's house, and you walk past all of these like single-fronted Victorian houses and little bungalows and the Brunswick house. You know what it looks like.
Everyone knows
The share house. Yeah. And this was in 2013 or 14. And back then it was like people just lost their shit. They couldn't believe that there was a video game set in Melbourne. And I was surprised that it hadn't been done. Like, to me, it was just natural, right? I'm a big fan of people like Daniel Clowes and Adrian Tamine, like these American graphic novelists who, in the 90s were sort of working with neorealism, which is this neorealism. I'm really kind of making this up. I think it's a film theory thing where it's about shooting real life and saying it's realistic. So like, you might make a short film about going and buying the newspaper at the milk bar and something interesting happens along the way, and that's enough. And like Daniel Clowes does it very well by setting... a lot of American authors have always done it really well, actually, by setting their stories in their own towns and just sort of, whatever story they write, the creative part is what happens, but the world around the artist gives them enough to work with. And yeah, Melbourne is thriving with things to include. I have no problem getting Melbourne into my stuff.
Yeah, and I think especially in like comics and zines, it's becoming more of a thing to in Melbourne to incorporate Melbourne. There's probably a comic about everything to do with Melbourne, everything. And like you said, Clouds, his stuff, from Ghost World to Wilson, weird stuff. But at the same time, there's certain aspects of each story that I think people can be like, I've done that.
Yeah.
Or I could have done that. Or
right.
I've been in a situation, all while thinking, holy shit, like what's going to happen next?
Yeah, the weirdness is the creative part of Dan Clowes. Like, other than his brilliant drawing skills, obviously, it's like he implants these these really weird stories onto these really unassuming people, or he creates these really weird characters and puts them into really non-weird places. Like, I don't know where all of his comics are set, like downtown Philly or LA or somewhere,
Him being as hipster as he seems to be, like, I reckon that'd be like based in like Portland.
Maybe, but the thing is, when he started in 1990 or whatever, he wasn't hipster at all. Like, he was just he was weird,
Well, that's all hipsters are.
Right.
It's all the stuff that used to be perceived as weird.
Correct.
Is now the new and happening thing. And I think that there's a lot of cities in the US that the work could be based in that would be representative of that. Philly's definitely a pretty hip place these days, particularly South Philly.
I'd love to go to Philly.
It's pretty cool. I was only there last year. It was quite enjoyable.
Cool.
And they are very proud of their town.
Yeah.
Which is a thing I found traveling around the US in general.
Yeah.
People are very proud of where they're from, and they're very interested in showing you what it's like. And I think that has a lot in common with people from Melbourne too.
Yeah, for sure.
If you talk to someone from Melbourne when you're overseas,
well,
do you know that you're talking to someone from Melbourne?
Yeah, well, you do actually. It's like what we were talking about earlier, Melbourne, Sydney. Sydney-siders are going to be very proud to say, well, I'm from Sydney, so what's your point? And Melburnians are going to say, well, I don't care what my point is because I'm better than you at a base level.
And people from other countries are like, the fuck is the difference?
Why are Melbourne and Sydney always fighting? Yeah.
Well,
it's the outback, right?
It's 100% true though, but it also, I found that like expats are also proud of where they're from.
Definitely.
There was
a huge part of the Australian culture.
Comic Grounds in LA is a coffee, a brewer, and
I know that place.
Oh man.
The guy that runs it is as Australian as can be.
I got a funny coffee story, man. Like, so I went overseas for the first time last year, which was amazing. I've always wanted to leave Australia just to have a look. And I got the opportunity to go to San Francisco and a couple of other cities up there. But in San Francisco, it's a wild place. The thing about San Francisco, one day my mate Ryan, who made a game called Paperbark, which is really worth checking out, he and I were kicking about and we went to get a coffee and he said, I know this place. It's kind of like a Melbourne coffee shop in San Francisco, right? And, oh, yeah, good. I could use a good cup of coffee. Let's go. It was pissing down with rain.
Of course.
Yeah, it was great. And we walk in and it's sort of this converted, mechanic's garage or some shit like that. It's got plants hanging from everywhere and there's polished concrete everywhere and, exposed light bulbs and big roasting tanks at the back. And it was a real like Melbourne style coffee shop. And in the middle, there are all of these baristas, as they say, looking real serious about their work and like taking coffee way too seriously. Like, I don't know about you two, but I know how to work a coffee machine. I've worked in a cafe. Like, I feel like most people on the street, not everyone, but most people on the street, I'd be like, hey, do you have you ever spun milk? Can you load a thing? But these guys were just so fucking serious. And so I ordered I ordered a latte and one of them was like, oh, you're from Australia? And I said, yeah, I'm from Melbourne. And all of them turned and looked at me and just sort of tried to make... I was watching them. I was laughing with my friend Ryan. Like, I think they were just trying to make the best cup of coffee they had ever made.
They were. Was that Cyclass coffee you're at?
Oh, I don't know what it was
Francisco?
Called. It was... It was pretty... maybe it was Cyclass. It's like a double story kind of thing.
It.
Yeah.
How interesting. My mate Tyson Stagg used to be the head barista there. He's
there you go.
Melburnian.
Is he? There you go. Yeah. Okay, cool.
He left, like, maybe... He's back in Australia now. He's currently over in Perth starting up some hipster warehouse conversion.
Yeah, right. They seemed so intimidated. They were just like, oh my God, there's a Melburnian in here. We've got to make the best coffee we can. It was good, don't worry.
It's like Homer Simpson when he goes to that chili eating competition. Right, it gets around that he can eat every chili. Yeah. So they go, all right, we're gonna fix him. They've got like the welding mask on to grab it, and he can't do it. But that's 100% what Melburnians have done to the coffee. This place in LA, Common Grounds, this coffee place was a share space with a graphic design studio, which I thought fit really well.
Yeah, really well.
And I was talking to the owner of the shop, and he just said, there's no good coffee here. Yeah. How can this happen?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what were you doing before this? He goes, oh, I was working at a cafe on Docklands. Yeah. And I'm like thinking, well, you've got to be able to make coffee. And sure enough, that was probably the greatest coffee I have had in America by far. And an American came out of the graphic design studio and was just like, you guys got to try this coffee. It's really good. And we're like, oh, we're from Melbourne. He goes,
so we're made of coffee.
He knew the story. Like, yeah, we're from Melbourne. He goes, okay.
Yeah, right. That's funny.
But it is interesting because we can actually relate this to gaming and the skills required for working in the industry. Mm-hmm. And that is that obviously Melbourne, in terms of coffee, has established itself as the world-class city. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking for someone to be a head barista at your place, irrespective of where you are in the world, if they've got specific Melbourne cafes listed, they're going to go higher up on the priority list.
Right.
For someone working in the games industry, what would be the places to be targeting to get those skill sets?
Ooh, so if I was trying to hire somebody from overseas?
Or even someone from Australia if you're trying.
Oh, well, if I was hiring... I mean... From Australia, I know some of the most brilliant devs who are living in Adelaide and Perth and Brisbane and all sorts of other places, Hobart, let alone, Wellington and Auckland as well. So I don't know. I think the reputation thing with that... well, I mean, like if I were to go and live in San Francisco and work in the games industry, I'd be working for a big AAA company. Or if I was living in Seattle, I'd probably be working for a big AAA. For an indie, if I wanted to go and do more sort of indie, small scale, like 5-6 person team stuff, I might look at Austin.
Yep.
Personally, I'd be interested in going to places like Edinburgh, but that's also for the kind of surrounding arts scene and in Edinburgh. South Africa is apparently pretty, like Johannesburg is apparently pretty cool.
Interesting.
And I did a trip to Kuala Lumpur last year as well, which has a really healthy little scene too. So in terms of like where are they all from, it's on the level that I'm working in. I think that I'm looking much more at an individual sort of air quotes talent, and that can really come from anywhere. You know, some of my favourite devs grew up in Albury-Wodonga, so you can't say they're going to have to be from Melbourne. Or,
well, they definitely had time to spend dedicating to their craft.
Well, they did.
I mean, it's not even necessarily about being from Melbourne. I mean, like what, Half Brick's based out of Brisbane?
Yep.
I think it is. So, and you think about it, as far as like a culture goes, this isn't anything against Brisbane or Queensland as a whole, but whenever it comes to it, it's always been about Melbourne and Sydney. Like that's, and yet...
I have a lot of faith in Brisbane, actually.
I'm sorry, everybody in Queensland. We don't mean to
my family's from Queensland, so I mean everything.
Hello, brother. Hello, niece.
Shout out, Brisbane.
Hello, sister-in-law.
I actually,
well.
you know what? My favourite Australian games academic lives up in Brisbane.
It's a good city.
It's a good city. In fact, three of my favourite game academics live up in Brisbane. They have this great little thing called, great thing. It's not a little thing. It is pretty little. I'm from Melbourne, though.
So everything's little compared to here.
Sorry. They have this great thing called Squiggly River, because, Brisbane's got a big squiggly river running through it. It's a cool name. And all it is that every week or every 2 weeks, anybody who's interested in video games gets together at the library there and hang out and talk and make games and talk about making games. And SAE, there's an SAE campus up there with a really strong games program, and it always shipping out really good students.
That actually presents an opportunity to talk about the idea of how you get into the games industry. Obviously, you have an actual official qualification, don't you?
Yes.
So, was that the thing that helped you?
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, cool. 100%. So, I graduated from school in 2008, and then in 2009, 10, and 11, I really just smoked pot and went to gigs. I didn't have a laptop in those years. So in about 2004 or 5, when I was in year 8 or 9, I got a drawing tablet. It's like first generation drawing tablet. My school had them, thank God. And I was able to learn how to use it pretty early in the piece. So at that time, there weren't really many other artists who were using tablets. I was really only this 14 or 15-year-old kid, but I got it quickly, which has really changed everything for me, basically, that I got on so young. So I learnt how to use it. I was online, like, hanging out with other artists, and we were just, like, trading character portraits and being nerds and learning, like, fostering how to draw. And then, for this period after high school, I didn't have a laptop. And that's another thing which, looking back, I'm really grateful for, because I kept drawing. I was just drawing using, ink and paint and pencils and doing a lot of life drawing and kind of getting those core skills up. And by the end of 2011, by the end of 2011, I was living actually in Windsor, not far from here, with my best friend, who was studying her undergraduate in music at VCA. But she was doing all of these other subjects. One of them was screenwriting. And she was out, and she'd left one of her assignments on the kitchen table. And I looked at it, and then I sat down and I did it. I did this assignment, and she came home and she was like, "Oh, this is actually pretty good. Can we submit this?" And I said, "Yeah, if you want to, fine." So we submitted it, and it got 90. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go to uni. Like, I'm going to
You
go
got
to
a high
uni.
distinction.
Yeah, like I'm going to go to from Melbourne Uni as well. Thank you
That's
very much.
amazing.
I'm going to go to uni. I think I want to do this because I'd really enjoyed sitting and writing and thinking about this little script that I wrote. Okay, what do I want to study? I like to draw. I like comics. I play a lot of video games, but I think I want to be an artist. So video games wasn't even on my mind. I went to the open day at RMIT, went to the fine arts school, and I sort of looked around at all of the printmaking and all of the sculpture and all of the photography and all of the painting, and I thought, it's cool, but I want to do that when I'm like 50. Like, not yet.
Completely.
I want to make comics and be a little punk rocker for a little while. So I went up to I saw a little, there was like a piece of A4 paper stuck to the wall with a Space Invader on it. And it said, "This way to the games program." And I thought, well, I don't know how to code, or I'm not even really very good with computers, but I do know how to use Photoshop. So I'll go and have a look. And I went up there, and all of the hallways were lined with students' the concept art. And I thought, I can do that. I really want to do that. Like, this looks perfect. So I had a chat to them, what am I going to learn here and how much coding do I have to do? And they convinced me. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. Like, as soon as I arrived, I was just having the best time. I was learning everything that I might need to know for a career in games as an individual. So they were equipping me to apply for jobs in AAA, but they were also just equipping me to collaborate in healthy ways and to acquire the skills that I needed to make a game by myself. Yeah.
I think it's really valuable that you said that the experience you got out of it helped you in your career path, but I think it's also an interesting point that you made that you took 3 years prior to deciding to go to university. Now, a lot of people listening to this that are young creatives might think that the moment they finish high school, they need to know what their next step is going to be, what their path is going to be. But having worked in the tertiary sector, I can tell you that's 100% not true.
I'd agree.
You're kind of living proof of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really subjective. Like, if you wake up, and you're 10 years old and you say, I'm going to fucking be a stuntman, and I know it, and that's all I want to do, go do it. When you finish high school, go and do the stunt person course.
Yeah.
But if you're waking up and it's the last day of year 12 and you're like, well, I don't know, if I could leave me alone, I don't know, that's fine too. Like, just be open to being guided by life. It'll happen.
And how much did your ATAR not worry? No matter.
If it worried, like if it were a problem, oh man, my inter score, I'll tell you what it was 51.7. And I'm really smart. Like, in year 11 and 12, I was going through hell. Like, I have the same thing that so many other teenagers have, is like, anxiety and depression and all sorts of that sort of stuff. Like, it'll get you. But that's the good thing about this ATAR thing, is that by the time I was old enough to want to go to uni, it was totally irrelevant.
Yep.
So, man, I wish that there was a way for students who are doing VCE now to know to just be okay with being a kind person and practice your art, practice what you want to do one day. Don't stop, but also just chill and wait until you know what you want to do, and it's fine.
And I think as well, just like in childhood where people want to be transformers, dinosaurs, firefighters,
helicopter,
ballerinas, all that sort of thing, which I guess if you want to be any of those things, go for it.
I'm yet to meet a transformer, but cool.
Yeah.
You just
go to Japan, mate.
You just don't know yet that
I met Bumblebee in Vegas.
That's pretty good. It's a good story.
And then in high school, it's the same sort of thing. I don't know what it was like with other people, but I graduated in 2008 from high school, and it seemed like the cool thing that everyone wanted to do was be a forensic psychologist. I reckon nearly every single person said that.
My dad wanted to do that.
There's so many people, and then it's well, firstly, I don't know if any of these people in school that said that became one. I don't know. But it just shows...
If they did, you should interview them Because they
If
are
they
a
have.
radult.
Yeah.
Yes, they are adults.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I hope that if I'm ever murdered, they can find my killer. But
It was me.
and maybe we should like say this in this episode. If there are any forensic psychologists, contact us and be on it. But it shows there and then that like these students that I went to school with chose these courses in VCE, like
Oh,
these,
yeah, right.
to follow on with that, to go, this is what I want to do. And it may not have happened. It may have happened,
Sure.
but obviously it shows that the
I mean,
end of school doesn't...
yeah. I think I know what you're getting at. You know, my friend Tom has done a number of degrees, and he's my age, you know, approaching 30 now, and he's only just, well, he's actually about 2 years or 3 years in now, but he's switched from, he finished a teaching degree. Like, he was a fully fledged teacher, which he always wanted to do, and he wanted to do it in high school. And he finished the degree and he was a teacher, and then he said, actually, I want to be something else.
He's like, I actually don't like kids.
Pretty much.
Now, we were just touching on the tertiary aspect, the tertiary education aspect.
Oh, by the way,
that.
before you ask, that was the RMIT Game Design Bachelor of Media and Communication, which is paired with the RMIT Bachelor of Computer Science Game Design.
So
thing.
go do that course.
Either or. If you're
And
interested in programming, go do the computer science. If you're interested in the art or the critical study of games or animation, go do that.
And you now teach in that program.
I do. From time to time. It's sort of, I'm friends with a lot of the staff there, and every now and then they'll say, oh, hey, do you want to, like, take this class? You know, I can't, or do you want to code teach this with me? Or, yeah. And I love it. I love it.
What sort of feeling does that give you, teaching?
When I was first teaching, I was still really, really quite young. I was like a fresh graduate. I think I just graduated, and I was, what kind of feeling? I mean, I was honoured, and nervous. Like, it felt to me like a huge responsibility, to be responsible for, like, imparting my wisdom to these students. And I didn't feel like, and I still don't, well, I kind of a bit, but it's growing on me. I didn't feel at the time like I had any wisdom to give. Like, I was so fresh out of uni, but, there's this other part of me now which is growing stronger that's like, no, Goldie, you'd done a shitload by the time you were asked to teach, and you did have wisdom. And so, yeah, a little nervous about how valuable I was for the students. But by the time I was in there teaching, we had a ball. Like, we had a really good time. All of these students were really improving over the 12 weeks, and I was having, a good time with all of them. And I think they all had a good time with me, so...
And I think you have extra wisdom because, as you stated, you smoked a lot of pot. I don't think that I have met someone who smokes pot that isn't wise in one way or another.
I completely agree, and it sucks because I don't really smoke it at all anymore. From time to time, if it's summer or whatever, I might if I'm down at the beach, but I can't smoke pot every day because I'm too busy, like, focusing on things. But when I was growing, when my brain was developing, I was so high all the time that I was just able to completely freely explore ideas and thoughts that now are probably so silly, but at the time I was like just deep on this new plane of thinking. And I think I definitely saw some things down there that made me a better person. I can't really sit here and condone pot use, but if I could...
She's nodding her head.
Hey!
She's actually lied in one.
Yes.
Right time and place, huh?
Students, don't do it on campus.
Is that when you got on the Clouds train? Was it during that?
Yeah, around that time,
Because I think he's on that.
I'm sure he is. I once had the opportunity to ask one question of Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers when I was 14.
What did you ask him? How fucking right is Melbourne?
I did not ask him that. I asked him about drugs, I think. And I said, you know, what do you think of drugs? Because I was 14. Like, I was so good as a 14-year-old. I was so good. I was so good and pure. And I said, what do you think of drugs? And he said, you know, drugs can be fun, but there are better ways to have fun. And I think that's pretty bang on. Like,
yeah, I agree.
They can be fun, but there are better ways to have fun. So you don't, yeah. And I mean, you know, on the other side of this coin, I've got friends who have kind of become enslaved to drugs and other drugs, like nasty drugs. You know, I would never, ever, you know, condone anybody like getting into harder stuff. It's just not fair.
Drugs with a capital D.
Yes, with a capital D, that's it. I am curious if they are prevalent in the gaming scene, though.
Mate, I don't even think I don't really think anybody in games smokes pot. Like,
it's more Mountain Dew, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
Code Red.
I don't know. I think if you're a dev and a successful dev, and when I say successful, I don't mean, you know, you're making lots of money, but you're working hard.
Yeah.
It's green tea.
It's green tea and exercise and all of that sort of stuff.
It's amazing how much of that is also what's true of the music industry.
Yeah.
You know how people have this perception that musicians or actors or whatever, creatives, are going to be high all the time or drunk all the time and they spend all their time doing this, when in reality, they spend most of their spare time either in a gym, at some kind of coach, or resting.
100%.
I must be listening to the wrong bands because, like, they're all doing yoga.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Like, it's yoga and, like, healthy body, healthy mind means you can perform your craft more.
Honestly, like,
I feel like those
it's true. It's
wild
true.
days are gone.
It's true. Like, any, you know, if there are younger listeners who are thinking about, you know, entering their 20s, because I'm about to exit my 20s, like wear sunscreen. I know it's cliche, but like, wear sunscreen and drink water and walk and do exercise and like look after yourself at a base level, like at a basic.
These are all necessities.
Yeah, sleep a bit. Like, don't work overnight if you can help it.
You don't need to pull like AAA company level cramming session with your coding in the last 3 days prior to release. We need to work a patch.
Oh wow!
Yeah, not with the right planning.
Yeah.
If you're on AAA titles, you don't have to do the cram sessions because they'll do a day one patch anyway.
Yeah.
So you can literally take your time and then...
Honestly, if you're on the AAA games, you've got the AAA salary. So
true.
You can go to sleep in your AAA house.
I do miss, I will be honest, one of the things I liked about Florence, I do miss the ability to just buy a game, put it in the console or load it on my PC.
I know what you mean.
And start fucking playing.
And that's it. Yeah, all of the DLC and sort of like...
What can you tell us about the project Wayward Strand?
Wayward Strand. Wayward Strand is the project that I am working on at the moment. It's pretty hard to talk about a project that you're working on at the moment because, you know, there's so much doubt in my natural head that I'm like, oh, it's really good, but I don't know how to convince you of that. Like, I'm not a very good salesperson, but I think it is a really good game. It's a short game. I've been calling it like an interactive audiobook. It's very passive to play. It's more like something we would like you to have on your phone or your Switch, hopefully, or like PlayStation or whatever, and like go to bed and turn it on and read a chapter of it.
Oh, interesting. You know? I've never thought about using a device as a bedtime.
Well,
it's the opposite of what I would advise people to do usually.
Sure. Just as like, you know, quiet reading before bed kind of thing. It's about Casey, who's this 14-year-old girl in 1978 in rural Victoria, and your mum's the head nurse at this local nursing home, and all you have to do is like hang out for 3 days and talk to the sort of staff and patients in this hospital, which is also on a floating ship.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's
kind
of
like a paddle steamer kind of ship, or
it's sort of it floats on helium, but it looks like a cruise liner. It's pretty cool. It's this weird...
That's wicked.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a futuristic...
Yeah. It's a little steampunky in a way, but I don't like steampunk. It's kind of...
It's without the brass.
I was going to say steampunk.
Yeah.
Can we call it clean punk, right?
We can call it clean punk.
Steam is...
Paddle steamer punk.
Alternate reality.
Alternate reality 78.
1978. Australia, yeah.
How interesting. That sounds like a really fun, relaxing game, but
It's
also an
super
interesting
relaxing,
conceptual space.
Hugely interesting conceptual space. Mostly like looking at ageism, and being 14. Like, when you're 14 and you're not really an adult, but you're not really a kid.
You're a kidult.
Yeah, you're a kidult and then you become a radult. Oh, look at that.
I know.
And like, when you're 14 and like you get tasked with talking to people who are much older than you, it can be a bit like, oh, I don't know why they're talking to me like an adult. I feel like a kid. But then it can also, go the other way.
That's me now, just talking to people that are my own age.
It takes you a long time to grow out of it, huh? I'm still in there. And like, all sorts of other themes. And so it's a really narrative heavy game, but luckily it's all been voice acted. So we're talking to some pretty exciting actors for that.
That's awesome.
Should be good. And I've got a couple of other projects that I'm working on, but Wayward Strand is the big one, and I'm just about to take that to San Francisco to try to get what we call finishing funds.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. I think a few people that maybe haven't even thought about the games industry before are probably across a lot of these terms now, thanks to Silicon Valley mentioning them all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we're in a day and age now which I feel privileged to be a part of, where people want narrative games now. Look at like some of the biggest games, like Life is Strange, Gone Home, stuff like these games that I feel are made for the Switch as well. And I think that the Switch is a brilliant port to have indie games coming out on, and which I'll lie to say that I got my Switch for indie games because I got it for Breath of the Wild.
Good choice.
However, the games that the indie showcases that they have on there that they actively promote in the store have been astounding. So I guess, do you think that the games focusing on like narration is at an all-time high now, and what do you think that is that brings people to play games like Life is Strange and even like towards the Telltale games?
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think that we're seeing a splintering of games. So I think we're seeing a lot of things being made and marketed as games, where what we're actually at is like the emergence of maybe a new form of media altogether. But it could just be the emergence of a new genre. I don't know enough about media theory to make it an accurate guess about this, right? If it's it could, as I said, if it's the emergence of a new genre in games, then yes, it's at an all-time high and it'll be cool for another couple of years, and then some other thing will come along and that'll be the next genre. Like, for example, in 1995 you had a huge influx of action thriller films, right? And in the 80s you had a huge influx of moody shot drama lighting dance-off teen films. So is it a genre? I don't know. I feel like it's actually a whole new kettle of fish, which is using the tools that we use to make games and even the devices that we use to play games, but we're more interested in something that is less about getting points, winning, losing, that kind of stuff.
Amazing. We don't have that much time left with you. We could end up talking to you forever, but that's all right. So we're going to mess with the format a little bit, and we're going to throw in your rad break at the end of your episode, which is pretty crazy in terms of how things work for us. But we always like to do this with every guest because we know we can get into some pretty in-depth and heavy stuff from time to time. So we like to ask you a couple of fun questions.
All right.
The first of which we're going to ask now is that, for those out there who don't know, who are listening to this, you don't just have a love for comics, you have a love for punk rock as well. Mm-hmm. What are 3 comics and 3 punk bands that you reckon people should check out?
Okie doke. Well, it's been getting a lot of press recently, so let's go with The Umbrella Academy. Is a great comic to read. Daniel Clowes' Ghost World is unmissable. And Joe Sacco Palestine is a tome. It's a really big book, but worth reading. Punk rock bands, probably Black Flag, Dead Kennedys and the Germs. Just keep it American.
She's just gone with the old school faves.
And not only that, but she answered that really fucking
so quickly.
I know who I
like. But
like.
I want to know, and this is staying positive, how do you feel about Mike Vallely in Black Flag?
For the other,
You're
the
a Rollins
olders.
fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to be. Dude's just a frantic ball of energy. And
I met him once.
oh, really? How was that?
Really cool. He looks like a brick wall.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's big. He's got a big
Pretty sure
neck.
that's his middle name is Brick
Yes.
Wall.
Brick wall.
I snuck backstage at the Big Day Out in 2006.
For the Rollins band set?
I saw him. He
Yep.
was talking, and Iggy Pop rolled past me on a
Oh,
golf
wow.
buggy, and I gave him a high five.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Iggy Pop, amen.
Well, I saw Rollins when he came out here for the spoken word tour, and how highly he talks about Iggy, and like how he like gave him like stuff, and like they traveled and everything. So
I bet they had a good time on that tour.
I bet they did, and I think it's so funny seeing such a what I took as an angry man originally, like with Black Flag and everything, and seeing the stuff he's doing, like in like voice acting, and like, you know, like, oh, it's Henry Rollins, and then underneath his name it's like Adventure Time character.
Yeah, right. That's right. Forgot about that.
Yeah. And
No, he's a
done other
nice. I mean,
things.
he's a sweetheart, I think. And the thing I like about him is just, you know, he's a smart guy. You know, that's my favorite thing about punk. Like with the Dead Kennedys as well. Like, even though like the Dead Kennedys is like, you know, the most cliche punk band, some of their lyrics. So, you know, my other favorite punk band probably would be like Minutemen, right?
Sweet.
You know, the lyrics that these Americans, and again, I love American art. I really love the way Americans have made art traditionally. The lyrics, like the political lyrics, they just hit the nail on the head. You know, they say some of the things that are unfair in the world, and they make it rhyme and they make it rock.
I believe Mike has one more Rad Break question for you, which he's going to ask with a straight face.
I don't actually think I can ask with a straight face. But I had to because
shit.
I am a huge gamer myself.
Cool.
And so like everyone knows the stereotypes, especially if you're a gamer. So you've stated that you don't like Mountain Dew or Doritos.
Me neither.
And you definitely don't like the gamer culture.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose one of those to like, which would it be?
Like fuck, marry, avoid.
Pretty much.
Fuck, marry, kill. What is it?
Let's do it with this one.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Gamer, Doritos, and Mountain Dew. Fuck, marry, kill. Is that it? Yeah. Fuck the gamer. Sorry, just making some sturdy eye contact across the room. Kill the Mountain Dew because sugary drinks are actually really a problem. And marry Doritos because hell yeah.
And I mean, like, if you're married to Doritos, they're not going to care about your cheesy fingers.
No, and I'd rather, you know, not have sex with food or
and
beverage.
like they come in so many different flavors. Every day would be an exciting experience.
Perfect.
It'd be like, oh, today I feel a bit spicy. Let's have a look at the jalapeno ones.
I'm always
Cool
going to just be
Ranch.
like that original like nacho cheese or whatever
That's a good flavor.
Yeah.
Just that. Just give me that one.
Anyway, before we go, we always like to ask our guests for their tips for being a Radult.
Ooh.
Start by eating Doritos.
Yeah, as I said, wear your sunscreen. Not kidding. Wear sunscreen. It's
Ladies and
every
gentlemen,
day.
the class at 1999, wear sunscreen.
Wear sunscreen. I know that it's been said before, but I stand by that. And yeah, that ties in also to self-care. You really need to perform self-care for the rest of your life.
Brush your teeth.
Brush your teeth. Wear sunscreen. Brush your hair. Have a shower every day. Don't stay up all night unless you're at a really good party. Practice really hard. Like if you want to be an artist or a musician or something like that, you need to for the first, like for your formative years, you need to aim to be the best of all of the people who you know who do it, in a friendly and helpful way. Like don't push others down, but practice really hard all the time. And probably just diverse, like go out to gigs and make sure you're really getting as deep into other art forms as you can. Like I'm really blessed to have really loved music growing up. So, you know, I was playing in bands and I was going to gigs, and just the experiences that I had in that creative field have carried me so far in games. So diversify your interests and have a good time all the time. Oh, also, when you go to uni, read your readings.
Yeah, no shit.
You know, read the readings. It's really interesting.
Don't skip your toots.
Yeah, don't skip your toots. Study hard. If you're lucky enough, like, count your blessings. If you're lucky enough to get into a university in Australia, don't squander that. You know, it's a good opportunity.
And network.
Yeah. I mean, be a chill dude, right? Like, shake hands with everybody who you meet. Don't discriminate.
Anyhow, thank you very much for coming on, Radults. It's been awesome having this discussion with you. Before you leave, just tell everyone where they can find you on the socials, where they can find the projects you're working on.
Yep.
Anything you want to plug, do so right now. Floor's yours.
Okay, well, I don't really do heaps of self-promo, but you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Ghost Town Goldie. That's GOLDIE. Ghost Town Goldie.
Well, there you have it, folks. We have had Goldie in the studio, the Rad Lair.
The Rad Lair. The Rad Cave.
So be sure to check out her stuff. I highly recommend Florence, and judging by everything that's been said in this episode, I will be jumping on all of her other games as well.